Hello, my name is Connor McClary. I'm here to talk about Edgar Allan Poe. He's a very well-known writer with many different works he was accomplished at a very young age. He lived a very brief and tragic life. He was born on January 19th in 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts. He was deserted by his father at birth, and his mom died 3 years later when he was very young. He was raised by family friends who never actually adopted him, and at a young age, his adopted parent, Mrs. Allan, had passed away. And his adopted father, Mr. Allan, didn't really want much to do with him, so they were always on a bad note. This left him heartbroken, and he was lost for the second time in his tragic life after losing his first family and then his second family, so things really hit hard for him. In his 20s, he decided to live with his Aunt Maria, Clem, and her daughter, Virginia. Poe fell in love with Virginia, and she was only 13 years old when they got married. And as did the other woman in Edgar Allan Poe's life, Virginia left him, not willingly, I would say, because she ended up dying young. And he didn't really recover from this. He ended up dying at the young age of 40 for reasons that only those could have guessed, such as alcoholism or just some other natural cause. He showed a lot of prowess in his writing when he was young. He was a great writer due to many of his valuable traits, such as his active imagination and his literary fervor. It provided him with 2 published volumes of poetry at 21. And a lot of evident influences in his life was the fact that he lived his tragic life in general. So it could have influenced a lot of his writings, which we'll get to in a little bit. It was tragedy, it was dark. It provided him with the grit that he needed to come up with the stories that reflected the type of darkness that he experienced throughout his life. One specific story that I'll talk about is The Cask of Amontillado. It's about a narrator, Montresor, who has a grudge against a member of the aristocratic circle in the story. They were friends. They were friends, but later he devises a plot to murder this man named Fortunato. The main character, Montresor, decides that to devise an intelligent plan to murder Fortunato without anyone finding out. It's carnival season in Italy, and they meet at the party. And they wait until he starts drinking. Fortunato starts drinking a little bit. And he decides to take him down into the catacombs, the vaults of the catacombs. As they're traveling through the vaults, he keeps giving him more drinks to keep him calm, to keep him level, so he doesn't guess what is going on. He lures him with the idea that he has a bunch of Amontillado, which is a rare wine during that time, and he says he has a lot of it, so he invites him to a private wine tasting event. They're conversing throughout their journey, and they arrive to a pile of bones with a trowel mixed into it, and Montresor pulls it out, and he follows Fortunato to a hole in a wall. He says that the wine is in the wall. Fortunato gets in the wall, and he ends up getting chained by Montresor, who ends up proving that he is a mason, and he ends up breaking him in to the wall slowly. He yells for help. It doesn't work. Montresor tells him they're too deep for anyone to hear, and he kind of gets uneasy through his yelling. Montresor feels a little guilty about this. Fortunato tries to play it off as if it's a nice joke that they'll both get over sooner or later, but Montresor finally just blocks the opening completely, and he hears him yell one last time and just gets this really guilty feeling about it. But it turns out, 50 years later, that Montresor still checks in, and the body is still there undiscovered. Now, with this, he has other works that are similar, such as his poem, The Raven. It's very popular because even though they're different writings, they have similar themes, And their style of writing is the same because they're dark, they're lonely stories, they're just about something tragic. He achieved a lot of success with both of the writings, and he's very descriptive in each writing. For The Cask, it's about a dark, deep, and damp catacomb, and for The Raven, it's a haunted, dark mansion, and that provides suspense. And usually, large buildings such as that are lonely. The Telltale Heart is another similar story because it is about a murder plot. Well, a murder plot that has already taken place, which is dark, it's tragic, it's gritty. And he is guilt-ridden in this story, the main character. They have similar plots, almost, and the theme of murder is sitting in both of these stories, obviously, like very obvious. For The Cask, his themes, murder, darkness, loneliness, specifically murder. It's clearly stated throughout the story because he talks about his plot to murder Fortunato. The dark and lonely theme is kind of implied just because of the setting. The setting takes place in the Italian carnival where they meet, but it ends in the catacombs underground. The catacombs play an integral part to the story because it was foretold to end and take place in this area because of his plot. Main character, I don't think he would have succeeded if the plot would have been, or the setting would have been different. I feel like the plot would have fallen through. It wouldn't have been as successful with the themes that I have provided. For the plot structure, the exposition, background information is spoken about in the first 4 paragraphs. It's about seeking revenge over Montresor, seeking revenge over Fortunato for his wrongdoings, getting revenge. The rising action is him leading Fortunato through the catacombs. The climax is when he ultimately finally achieves his goal of murdering Fortunato and leaving him behind a wall alone. The falling action is when Fortunato tries to convince Montresor that it was a joke and they can just continue on their lives as if nothing happened, but he continues to close it anyway. And the resolution is when we find out that Montresor places the last brick and tells us that no one has found the remains and it's 50 years later. A significant quote I found was, "Indeed, it is very damp." There's more to it, but that's just that's the main part of the quote that was memorable. It's on page 8, and it's significant because it helps reinforce the theme of darkness, loneliness, and it's because of the setting. Another quote is, "These vaults are extensive," and it's Fortunato kind of speaking with unease, like he doesn't know what's going to happen. He's worried. Kind of dramatic irony because we know why they're down there. Reinforces the murder plot, and it really kind of just makes the story darker because we know what's happening. They're having a good time, but it ends the way that it ends. For special topics, the story talks about a friendship that's turned bad, and it's so bad that one man plots to murder his friend for vengeance because of it. This is a social conflict, so it would apply to the Marxism school of literary theory that we've discussed in class.